Open your wallet and look at a $100 bill. It's a nice piece of paper. It has Benjamin Franklin on it, looking back at you with a slight, knowing smirk. In your mind, that $100 represents a fixed amount of work, a fixed amount of sweat, and a fixed amount of time you traded to get it. But Benjamin Franklin is laughing at you, because that $100 is a lie. You see, the biggest magic trick in human history isn't pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It's the ability of a central bank to make the value of your labor disappear, while the numbers in your bank account stay exactly the same. They call it inflation. It's a sophisticated-sounding word, designed to make you think it's a natural weather pattern, like rain or a heat wave. It isn't. Inflation is a man-made heist. Let's go back to 1970. If you walked into a grocery store with a $100 bill, you weren't just buying dinner. You were buying the whole store. You could fill 3, 4, maybe 5 carts to the brim with steaks, milk, eggs, and enough beer to forget that disco was about to happen. You could buy a high-end suit. You could pay a month's rent in a decent city. In 1970, $100 was a weapon. Fast forward to 2026. You walk into that same grocery store with that same $100 bill. You pick up a bag of organic avocados, a flank steak that's 40% fat, a carton of eggs that cost more than a small tech stock, and maybe a bottle of detergent. Suddenly, you're at the register, and the teenager with the nose ring tells you it's $98.50. You walk out with 2 plastic bags that aren't even heavy enough to give you a workout. What happened? The avocados didn't become 10 times harder to grow. The cows didn't start demanding a higher minimum wage. The eggs are still just eggs. The physical reality of the world hasn't changed. What changed is the yardstick you use to measure it. Imagine you are a carpenter, and every night while you sleep, a government official sneaks into your workshop and trims an inch off your ruler. On Monday, a foot is 12 inches. By Friday, a foot is only 8 inches long. You keep building the same house, but suddenly, the walls don't fit, the roof is too small, and you're working twice as hard just to make a door that opens. That is the inflation lie. They tell you that prices are rising, but prices aren't rising, the floor is sinking. Your $100 hasn't moved. It just buys $10 worth of 1970s reality. And here is the deadpan kicker. The people in charge tell you this is a good thing. They tell you that a healthy economy needs 2% inflation. Why? Because if your money actually held its value, you might stop spending it. You might stop borrowing. You might stop being a good little hamster on the consumption wheel. They need your money to melt. If it stays frozen, they lose control. If it melts, you have to keep running just to stay in the same place. So Ben Franklin keeps smirking. He knows that as long as you believe the number on the paper matters more than what the paper can actually buy, the trick will keep working. You aren't getting richer. You're just getting more paper for a life that's becoming increasingly unaffordable. If you feel like you're getting poorer. But the evening news tells you that inflation is cooling down at a comfortable 3%. Congratulations. You've just encountered the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It is the government's favorite thermometer, mostly because they've figured out how to make it show a normal body temperature, even while the patient is literally on fire. The way they measure inflation is a masterpiece of creative accounting. They use a basket of goods, a collection of things the average person supposedly buys. But over the years, they've realized that if they actually measured the stuff you need, like a house, healthcare, and a college education, the numbers would look like a horror movie. So they started using substitution. Substitution is a fancy word for lowering your expectations. In the government's eyes, if the price of steak goes up by 20%, you won't keep buying steak. You'll buy ground beef. If ground beef gets too expensive, you'll buy chicken. If chicken spikes, you'll buy a bag of lentils. and a cookbook on how to pretend they taste like meat. When they calculate the CPI, they just swap the expensive steak for the cheap lentils and tell the public, look, the cost of dinner hasn't changed. It's like a doctor telling you that your vision is fine, because even though you're blind in one eye, you've learned to tilt your head to the side. Then there are hedonic adjustments. This is where the gaslighting truly becomes an art form. The economists argue that if a new smartphone costs $200 more than the old one, it's not actually an increase in price. Why? Because the new phone has a better camera and a faster processor. They claim you're getting more value, so they adjust the price downward in their spreadsheet. According to their math, the price of technology is always falling. But you can't eat a faster processor. You can't pay your rent with a 48-megapixel photo of your empty fridge. You're still out an extra $200. But on the government's chart, it looks like you're winning. They also love to talk about core inflation. This is my favorite. Core inflation measures everything except food and energy. You know, the two things you literally cannot survive without. They exclude the gas in your car and the bread on your table because those prices are too volatile. That's like a weather report that ignores rain and wind because they're too unpredictable. It's technically a report, but it's completely useless for deciding whether or not to bring in. Umbrella. Why do they go through all this trouble to cook the books? Because the truth is too expensive. The government has trillions of dollars in obligations that are tied to the official inflation rate, Social Security payments, military pensions, and interest on debt if they admitted that real inflation was 10 or 15%. The entire system would go bankrupt by Tuesday afternoon. So they tell you the lie. They give you a 2% cost of living adjustment while your grocery bill is up 20%. They tell you that you're living in a time of price stability while you're calculating how many kidneys you need to sell to afford a down payment on a house. The CPI isn't a measurement of your cost of living. It's a measurement of how much the government can squeeze you before you start sharpening the pitchforks. It's a fairy tale for adults, designed to keep you calm while your purchasing power is led to the slaughterhouse. If inflation is so bad for the average person, you might wonder why the people in charge don't just stop printing money and go back to a system that actually works. The answer is simple. The entire global financial system is currently a giant, teetering tower of debt, and inflation is the only thing keeping it from crashing down on everyone's head. The US government owes over $34 trillion. That is a number with 12 zeros. It is a number so large that if you spent $1 every second, it would take you over 1,000,000 years to pay it back. There is no plan to pay off this debt. There is no magic gold mine. There is only one way out, the silent default. You see, if the government borrows $1 trillion today, and then they spend the next 10 years making sure the dollar loses half its value, they've effectively cut their debt in half. They pay back the lenders with monopoly money, dollars that look the same but buy way less. Inflation is a transfer of wealth from the people who save money to the people who owe money. And the biggest debtor in the history of the world is the government. This is why they have a 2% target. It's not about economic health. It's about a slow, controlled burn of your purchasing power to subsidize their overspending. If they had deflation, where prices actually go down, the value of their debt would increase. They would be trapped. This is why the Federal Reserve panics whenever prices start to drop. They call it a crisis when your gas gets cheaper, but a strong economy when your rent goes up. The debt engine requires constant fuel. That fuel is new money. When the central bank clicks a button and creates $1 billion out of thin air, they get to spend that money first. They buy bonds, they fund programs, they bail out banks. By the time that new money trickles down to your local grocery store, prices have already risen to absorb it. It's called the Cantillon effect. The people closest to the money printer get the steak, You get the inflation. This is also why they hate the idea of a fixed money supply. If money is scarce, like gold or Bitcoin, the government can't just print their way out of a bad fiscal year. They would have to live within their means, like a normal human being. But living within your means doesn't win elections. Giving away, free, money while secretly devaluing your savings is a much better political strategy. Inflation is the ultimate hidden tax. If the government told you they were going to take 10% of your bank account every year, there would be a revolution by sunset. But if they just make everything cost 10% more through currency debasement, most people just blame the greedy corporations or supply chain issues. The debt engine doesn't care about your retirement plan. It doesn't care about your ability to buy a house. It only cares about staying fueled. And as long as you keep your labor stored in their melting paper, you are the one providing the fuel. They are paying for their past mistakes with your future freedom. If you've listened this far, you've realized that the game is rigged. The house always wins because the house owns the printer. So what do? Do you just curl up in a ball and watch your savings evaporate like a puddle in the Sahara? No. You change the way you store your life. The first thing you have to accept is a hard truth. Savers are losers. In a world of sound money, saving was a virtue. In a world of debt-based fiat, saving cash is a slow-motion financial suicide. If you keep your wealth in a savings account earning 0.5% interest, while real-world inflation is hitting 10%, you aren't saving. You are being harvested. You are voluntarily giving up 9.5% of your life force every year to a system that doesn't even know your name. To survive, you have to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a central bank. You need to own hard assets, things that cannot be printed, clicked into existence, or devalued by a committee of old men in suits. Real estate, productive businesses, gold, Bitcoin, commodities. These are things that have intrinsic scarcity. When the government doubles the amount of money in circulation, the price of a steak might double, but the value of an acre of land or a bar of gold stays the same. It just takes more of their trash paper to buy it. You also have to understand good debt. This is the great irony of inflation. It rewards the debtors and punishes the responsible. If you have a fixed-rate mortgage at 3% and inflation is 7%, the bank is effectively paying you 4% a year to live in your house. You are paying back the loan with cheaper dollars than the ones you borrowed. In an inflationary death spiral, the person with the most productive debt is the one who survives the best. But most importantly, you need to invest in your human capital. Your skills, your knowledge, and your ability to provide value to others. The government can devalue the dollar. They can collapse the bond market, and they can tax your capital gains. But they cannot print a replacement for your expertise. The inflation lie works because it relies on your apathy. It relies on you being too tired from working your 9 to 5 to notice that the exit sign is being moved further away every single day. They want you to stay in the cash trap. They want you to keep chasing the number instead of the value. As we move deeper into 2026, the cracks in the facade are becoming impossible to ignore. The currency is tired. The debt is unsustainable. The lie is getting louder. You can't stop the printer. You can't change the CPI. You can't talk the Fed out of their 2% obsession. But you can refuse to be the fuel. Stop measuring your success in melting paper. Start building a portfolio that the government can't delete with a keystroke. The $100 bill in your pocket isn't money. It's a countdown timer. Benjamin Franklin is still smirking on that bill. But if you play your cards right and move your wealth into things they can't print, you might just be the one who gets the last laugh. Welcome to the real economy. It's cold, it's rigged, and the floor is still sinking. But at least now, you know how to swim.